All right, I'm calling to order the Finance and Administration Committee and Board of Directors meeting for Marine Water for February 24th. And our first order of business is to call the roll.
Director Bragman.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Russell.
Here.
Chair Kohler.
I'm here. Our next item is to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I have a motion to adopt the agenda, but I'd like to make a change in the agenda. I'd like us to defer item 3. Refer item 2 to a full board meeting sometime in the future. I think that this item is a little askew from the goal of the Finance Committee, and it would be better to have it in a forum where the public could participate more fully.
Okay. Molly, do we need a second to that, or just, is there any board discussion on this?
Yes, I think President Kohler, Director Kohler, because Chair Kohler, we have, I can get the title right at some point. Sorry.
Okay.
I need more coffee today. We do need a second, and we should take a vote on the revised agenda. I do want to point out to the committee that we do have a deadline for submittal to the county to keep in mind, and that's March 11th. So
Okay.
it doesn't leave us a lot of time, but if there is an interest in revising the agenda, a second and then a vote would be the way to go.
Okay, Larry Bragman, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason it's on the agenda is to discuss whether it should go on a full board agenda. We're not going to take action today. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of air out the issues. So I do not support the motion.
Okay, can I ask a quick question of you, Larry, and maybe of Molly? I think it is an action item for today. I mean, so I guess right now the recommendation is to refer to the board. Right.
That's not an action.
Well, I mean, it's not set up as an information item generally.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's set up as an action item for referral to the board, which is different than an information item. But we can turn it into an information item.
If it had been information, I wouldn't have made the motion, I don't think.
So if I could try to help with the discussion and the process, it is listed as a review and refer. Certainly can be presented to the committee and then no action taken to refer it to a board meeting. As it's agendized currently, there's no requirement that it be referred to a future board meeting. Or the way it's agendized now would allow that to happen, and typically that's either no opposition voiced as we've done it in the past, or a first and a second from the committee members.
Okay,
that helps. I don't know.
So with that, we have a motion. We don't have a second. I just want to before we move on, I want to make sure nobody wants to make a second.
What's the motion again?
Larry made a motion to remove the item from the agenda for this meeting and defer it to a board meeting.
Okay. And we don't want to do that? Is that what I'm understanding? I
believe Larry Bragman did not.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. But do we have any further board comment on this? Because I think now that we've got a motion, we have to go to public comment. And we have to go to public comment on it anyway, but. Okay, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, Ed. Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. We need drought immune supply of water. I urge the board to proceed with a June ballot measure to repeal Measure S. Voters having just come through last fall's existential crisis, the timing could not be better. This is too important to bury it in a finance committee meeting, which almost no one has an interest in. Well, maybe me excluded and a couple others. This should be in front of a full board, publicly discussed. It's too important to bury it in this kind of a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 more public comments, Steve Isaacs, then Roger Roberts. Mr. Isaacs, please. Mr. Isaacs? Okay, let me go to Roger Roberts then. Roberts. Mr. Roberts?
Good morning. Happy
24th of February.
And to you, Roger.
You may already be aware of this, but the Planning and Conservation League sponsored a series of recommendations to the state on a whole range of water issues, among which includes investigation into water rights and the existing water rights that you might want to rely upon in the event of the completion of the Intertie project. And so, not surprisingly, it's part of the opening arguments on what to do about water across the state, and you may want to track this. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you. Mr. Isaacs, are you available now, sir?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. My name is Steve Isaacs, a founding member of the Marin Coalition for Water Solutions. I want to speak strongly in favor of a June 22 ballot measure to rescind Ordinance 418. But it's not enough to put it on the ballot. The Marin Municipal Water District must aggressively promote rescinding the ordinance. Hopefully, MMWD recognizes that we have a serious crisis and our current 2-year water supply is inadequate. We should have 4 years or more, like other agencies that have done strategic planning, rather than depending on rationing as our primary solution. So the strong support of the board and the staff is critical. We had a serious problem 10 years ago when you shelved plans for desal. And because of climate change, our situation has only gotten worse. We need a supply solution that is drought resistant and doesn't rely on outside, probably unreliable sources for our water, like the East Bay and Sonoma. Those drought resistant solutions include desalination, recycling, and of course, conservation. Finally, Director Bragman must recuse himself from any votes regarding desal and increasing our supply. He filed suit in 2009 to block MMWD's small-scale attempt to test the desal unit near the Richmond Bridge, Marin, Anchorage. That lawsuit lost in court. But seeing as though Bragman has clear prejudice against desal and probably any increase in our water supply, he should recuse himself going forward on votes regarding those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Larry Minikes.
I'll be brief. Unfortunately, I have overlapping meetings, but I want to speak to this. If you do decide to put it off until a full board meeting, which I understand Larry's point, I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I would only suggest that you make it early in the agenda and allow a lot of time for it, because you're on such a tight time frame that you have to take, it sounds like you have to take action unless you have another special meeting ahead of that, since March 11th, I believe is what Molly said is the date. So that would be my one suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul Duder, go ahead, sir. Mr. Duder.
Hi, I just have some questions about Sonoma Water and the Castania pump.
Mr. Duder, can I just interrupt you for a second? This is we have not yet done public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Right now, the agenda item before us is very, very narrow. It's just whether or not to take this particular item off of the agenda for this committee. That's all we're talking about right now.
I have no comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, thanks.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
No problem.
No further comments.
Okay, any further board comment on this item?
I do. It's a little ironic to hear a demand for me to recuse, which has no legal basis. And when, in fact, I'm advocating that we do take it up for discussion today. My point is, I do agree with President Russell's suggestion that it go to a full board meeting. It's obviously an important thing for us to take up on that level. And my point today in opposing the motion is simply that it gives us a chance to kind of air out some of the issues before it goes to a full board meeting.
Yeah. I'm gonna do something a little unusual, Larry Russell. I'm gonna ask if you wouldn't mind, if you would consider withdrawing your motion. I know we've got a motion and a second, but we also have, I think, and also Monty's not here. So I think one way or another, this is going to a board meeting. For the members of the public who are concerned that this is being buried, I respectfully disagree. That's not how this works. The purpose of having it in a committee meeting is to have an initial conversation. And obviously a decision is not being made here without it going to a full board meeting. So let's all be clear on the process. That said, and I think I'm personally uncomfortable proceeding with taking something off the agenda when one of our board members feels differently. So anyway, that's just my request to you to consider.
Sure, that's fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay. So that
Then I'll
said,
make a motion to approve the agenda.
thank you.
How about that?
Second,
Thank you.
Director Bragman,
aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is public comment on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. I'm assuming we want to hear from Mr. Duder at this point.
Yes, yeah, yes, go ahead, Mr. Duder.
Sorry for the confusion. I tuned in late, so I didn't.
No problem.
No problem whatsoever.
So I have a question about Sonoma Water and the Castania pump. So I've been, I like the presentation from several weeks ago about the Castania pump and the opportunity now for taking more water from Sonoma. I guess I'm a little bit confused about what the process would be, kind of why we haven't been taking more water from Sonoma up to now. Anyhow, I guess I'm not really sure what the limitations were. I know that we have a 5.3 acre foot taker pay agreement, and we have a contractual ability to take 14,000 acre feet. And I guess the Castania pump gives us the ability to take about 12,000. So I guess my question is, do we intend to start taking 12,000? And what would the do we need a new contract with Sonoma to do that? And are we planning to do that? Do we kind of have that in the works? I'm just kind of curious about that.
So Mr. Duder, I'm just going to jump in here because these are items that are not on the agenda. I think all of us here would very much like to engage with you on that, but we're not legally allowed to do so. So I am going to request that I know that you are a regular attendee of our meeting, so I'm going to request that staff specifically agendize the situation with Sonoma at our board meeting. We generally have a water supply update, but I think all of your questions are excellent ones. And if I could impose on you to submit those in writing to the staff, I just want to make sure that they're all covered in the presentation that we are going to have next week at the full board meeting, if that's okay with staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Chair Kohler, we'll incorporate this into our water supply update discussion.
That'd be the perfect place to do that. I hope that works for you, Mr. Duder.
Okay, thanks. Good. Thanks.
There are none.
Okay, that brings us to our next item, which are the minutes of, which are the minutes of the last meeting in January.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on approval of the minutes?
Not the minutes. Director Bragman,
I'm going to abstain,
Oh, that's
excuse
fine.
me, because I wasn't there. So I'm going
thank
to
you,
abstain.
sir. Director Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson, and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the review of ordinance 418. Ben, you're muted.
Yeah, this is my item, and just noting, as described in the staff report and as discussed during the earlier discussion, there's a closing window if the district wants to place a ballot measure on the June ballot to address the existing voter initiative that ultimately hampers our ability to proceed with the desal project were it determined to be the preferred project coming out of the water supply assessment. There are concerns with proceeding. with a ballot measure, namely that it could be very difficult to communicate the purpose of the ballot measure to our customers, that there may be a misunderstanding with some believing that the vote is actually to decide if the district should proceed with a desal project, instead of the reason being that it would remove this constraint from further consideration. So this is really, it is a difficult issue because there's no clear path to go, but given that the window for June closes, and certainly if the board wanted to hold this off and see through the water supply assessment, if the desal rises to the top, we could do this at a subsequent scheduled election or even a special election if we needed to. The timing would be tight in context of an emergency, as we described in the staff report, but at this point, that doesn't look like a near-term concern. So with that, I'll answer any questions that the board may have.
Can you explain that a little bit more? What do you mean that's not a near-term concern?
Just given the levels of storage we have now, and we're projecting that even if there were no rain through March and April, which seems like an increasing, I guess, relatively likely scenario, we would still be December 1st between 50 and 60,000 acre feet. So we wouldn't be this time next year looking at some emergency drought scenario in all likelihood, assuming that we do get rain in the winter, which we always have historically gotten.
Okay.
And right now we're at about 90%, 95%.
Yeah, we're about 94, so we're still looking good, and we are aggressively taking additional water from Sonoma, and our customers are still conserving. So yeah, our water supply continues to look good, although we all are cognizant of this very unique dry period we've had January and February that is giving us, it's maintaining, of course, our utmost attention.
So right now we're over 70,000, correct? 75,000, something like
Yeah,
that.
Paul, is it 74-ish, somewhere around there? Do you know?
Yeah, that's right.
And we just got a smidge a couple days ago. I don't know if that made any measurable difference.
Yeah.
So, my point in wanting to keep it on is just to get these issues on the table and maybe help our residents understand our process and our thinking and where we're at on this desal, where it really fits into the whole scheme of things. So, I just think it helps transparency and education. And I think it also does fit into our overall supply analysis, which is, we've got that study underway now, and it's simply a way to assure people that all options are on the table.
I have a question, Ben. Obviously, right now we are looking at new sources of water. We've got the EIR going on for the intertie. We're doing a couple of studies with Sonoma, looking for more water there. As we go through this process of looking for more water, we've articulated several times all options are on the table. When we do the studies, does desal get any less treatment? Because in fact, we can't do it. We're prohibited by law from doing it. Does it get a lesser position in our analytical framework?
Yeah, absolutely not. The intent is to do a rigorous, robust analysis of all the options, and through the process, develop criteria for the decision-making by the board and discussion with the public on ultimately directing staff in a roadmap to implement. for additional supplemental water. So we fully expect all of the options will have equal robustness in their review.
Okay.
We commit to that, in fact,
Yeah.
regardless of this issue.
Okay, good.
I think that's a really important point. I think there's been a fair amount of confusion about that. So I really appreciate the general manager making that clear. I think that's certainly been the board's view, that all the options are on the table, including desal. And I'm hoping, we haven't talked a lot about this, but you know, one of the options that I've always thought is going to make real sense for the district in the longer term or middle term is regional desal, right? I mean, that's really where we're looking at a desal option that potentially makes the most sense for us from a financial perspective, you know, sharing that burden across the region. And, you know, and I know that the studies are ongoing for that. So that seems to me to be something that's likely to happen in, you know, some middle term range. And I think one thing that that we want to be talking about when we talk about desal is our participation in that work, is the district's participation in that, you know, those you know, that initiative and what that means for us. I think that emphasizes additionally reasons for us to be considering the intertie.
Another issue I wanted to put on the table is, if we did do a recycled water project with CMSA, that would probably involve reverse osmosis treatment of the water.
Right.
And given the salinity of the water, as President Russell has pointed out, that's a desal project, although it's a desal project of a different type. And, you know, so it's just another consideration as far as removing the desal ban as we move forward. But it's something that we need to consider, because if we don't, you know, we could face a challenge, and, you know, we could really get into a further situation of delay. So just another thing for us to consider, for staff to consider as well.
Right. And to if I can add to both what Cynthia said and what you said, Larry, there's also a lot of discussion about the possibility of a desal partnership at the mouth of the Petaluma River with Sonoma and possibly North Marin Water. Right. So the regional concept on desal has the most potential, in my judgment, for desal.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're going to do this assessment and we'll learn more, but I'm really glad to hear you say that, because that's certainly where I've been for a while, is that, you know, the financial challenges with desal make a lot more sense when you do it at scale. We've certainly seen that at other parts of the country and frankly around the globe.
And it's not just financial. There's also operation issues.
Exactly.
Having more straws gives you the ability for other people to take water at odd times when the system needs to run, even though there's really no demand for it.
Yeah.
Right. And we may be getting ahead of ourselves here, but I don't believe the local ordinance would preclude our involvement in any of those regional initiatives.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, that's why I'm asking. It was my understanding that they didn't, at least not until they got to a farther point than they are now.
The current, sorry, if there's an interest in, I can speak to that briefly. The language is pretty straightforward, that voter approval is required prior to the district financing or approving financing or financing for construction of a desalinization facility. So there is not greater detail because it is an initiative that was voted on as a ballot measure. There does tend to be deference to the breadth of the intent. So that is to say, we want to give the voters the benefit of their choice when they voted on that. So financing could be construed to include financing of a facility that isn't specifically for the district, but could be financing for a regional facility. That said, planning, other kinds of activities specifically are not included.
And I think if you put there were two competing ballot measures on that same election. And if you put them side by side, the difference is that the agency measure did not include a ban on planning and that kind of preliminary consideration of such a project. So, yeah. So
In fact, I think
That's
we
correct.
did the EIR after that ballot measure.
We did.
okay. Okay. So again, it just provides some assurance that desal gets full consideration and full planning consideration as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further board comment on this. Larry, Russell, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I'm cool.
Okay. I think I need to hear from people about whether you want to refer this to the full board. Do you want to refer it as an information item? Do you want to refer it as an action item? Or do you not want to refer it at all?
Let's get the public comment, I think.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask the board about that first, but
Either way, you're the boss.
okay, but I'm not seeing anybody biting. So do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have Ed. Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you again. This needs to go to the board with all haste so we meet the deadlines. It's important and we don't have much time to waste or lose. So please, let's get on with it to the board. Thanks.
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay, so what do you folks want to do?
I'll just say at this point, if it's going to go to the board, it should go as an information item.
Won't we have to make a decision though? Isn't time a issue there?
Yeah, there is. We have a deadline of March 8th. The 88th day, I guess, is March 8th to put it on the June ballot, which would precede the completion of our water supply study. So,
What's your feeling, Jack? I mean, I think that's my concern, is that putting this on the ballot before the supply study seems to be putting the cart before the horse. I think the message to the public is we've decided, that the study's pre-decided.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'll buy that.
I'm happy to go with wherever the board is. What do you think, Larry Russell?
I think that is the correct description, that we are getting the cart in front of the horse. However, we have kind of a special situation here, which makes it complicated, which is, we have the voter interest right now with respect to desalinization, although one might not notice it from the public comment on this item. So I'm kind of torn in this whole aspect.
Yeah.
It seems like a good time to move forward. On the other hand, it definitely qualifies for the description you just gave it, which is, we're getting the cart in front of the horse because we don't have the gun's not loaded in terms of moving forward by any means. But we do need to get this out of the way if we're going to have to go forward with desal at some point in time.
My suggestion would be put it on the next meeting as an information item. There's another side to desal. There's opposition to desal as well. So, I think if we put it on as an information item, get probably a fuller complement of the community commenting. If we decide to move forward, we have to have a special meeting to put it on the ballot. I don't want to get pushed into putting it on the ballot prematurely either, and I think it does present a difficult messaging problem given where we are with our supply study and everything else. So yeah, it's not an easy situation to navigate, in my opinion. But I think sort of just dropping it now is not the way to go. So I would put it on the next agenda as an information item. Just, I saw one of Ben's previous emails and it was referred today as an information item as well. So I think, it's a big decision and I think it should come on as an information item only.
Mhm.
In particular, since Monty isn't here. I mean, this is something I believe, I mean, we haven't discussed it, of course, but my sense is that he would certainly have some views on this.
Mhm. Well, I mean,
So,
the most important thing, I believe, is to have the discussion. So information or, approval, either way, let's at least get the discussion going. Let's open it up, so we can thrash it out. That's step one.
Okay,
What-
does the staff feel they have direction on this?
What is the date of our next meeting? Is it the 1st?
It's March 1st.
That's correct.
So Chair Kohler, what I'm hearing is staff will get this as an informational item on the March 1st board meeting agenda.
Mhm.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Terry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I actually have one more person that would like to raise, Christy would like to leave a public comment, if that's okay with you and the board.
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead, Christy.
This is Christy, and I'm just wondering, when is the water supply study going to be completed? I think that should direct what you guys are deciding here.
Ben, can you speak to that?
Sure. We are currently scheduled to complete the water supply assessment in late June or early July timeframe.
Okay, well, I gotta say, you gotta move on this sooner rather than later. We can't be looking at another shoulda, woulda, coulda, as we have been regarding the intertie. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further public comments.
That will bring us to our third item, which is the monthly financial update.
All right, good morning, Chair Kohler, members of the board. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, so this will be a review of our financial state as of the end of January. If we were going straight line on the budget, we'd be at 58.3% of budget as far into the fiscal year that ends June 30th. So you can see here, water revenues are 48.7%, $42 million, a little bit below the mark for budget, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. Other revenues, which include things like rents and grants, interest on our portfolio, those are a bit ahead, and I think most of that is because we got a one-time inflow of money of a little over $2 million for our delinquent accounts. Fire flow fees are right at where we expect them. We got our first remittance in the December property tax remittance, so that's right about half of budget as we would expect. And then capital revenues are about 51.5% for the year. So we said we'd look a little more at the line that makes up our water revenues. So here you can see, and you can see this in exhibits 1 and 2 in your packages. This looks at what the different components are here: water sales, service charge, and the watershed fee. The service charge and the watershed fees are right about where they should be as fixed charges. We can see that water sales were behind budget here. We're about 47% of budget through January. However, if you look at those enclosures in your package and you see the way that revenues flow in previous years, you can see that last year at this point we're at about 68% of revenues, and that's because we get a lot of our water usage in July and August here, and then again in June. So we are, compared to last year's, we're running fairly behind budget on water sales, on commodity sales, and that's due mostly to the conservation efforts that we've had through the drought have been very effective. And then we always show you the monthly water sales, and this includes those meter service charges and watershed maintenance fees. And you can see here how those compare to the previous fiscal year. So in January here, the blue bars this year compared to the previous January, we're about 30% behind, despite having a lot less rainfall this January than we did last January. And we're about 30% behind the previous year in December too. So that trend is kind of continuing to bear out as people continue to conserve. And then we show you year to date in acre feet, how we're looking in water usage. And you can see here on the bottom line on the total, we're down over 4,600 acre feet compared to the previous year. That's about a 30% decrease. And as you look down the rows here, you can see some of your very large contributors to that bottom line. Single family is by far the biggest, and that's a 34% decrease in water usage year to date. And then you can see also in irrigation, that's a 46% reduction. So that's where you're picking up a lot of that 4,647 acre feet. But you can see that we are down compared to the previous year in all categories. And then you can see tier consumption as January in acre feet. And you can see the previous drought that we had here in fiscal year 16. You can see the decrease there. And you can see that here in 22, as we moved into January, that's actually we've dropped below what our water consumption was in all tiers compared to the previous drought. And then we always show you some AMI data. The first slide is for single family residences only in the areas of Tiburon Belvedere, 1,175 meters. And you can see here the January numbers. This yellow bar is this January. And it's fallen down to kind of where those previous two fiscal years were. And compared to the previous year, it's down about 20% in that area. So that's the trend that we see in those previous slides that we showed you. And then we show you AMI data for business meters. This is a smaller sample size of 82 meters throughout the district. And here you can see kind of a reverse of what you're seeing on the residential side. You see here that we're up 20% this January compared to the previous January. And you can see there January of fiscal year 20 there. We're slightly below that, but we're up over the previous January. So it looks like, as you would expect, as we kind of come out of COVID, that businesses are picking up and using more water. And now we'll turn to the expenditure side, and you can see data on this in enclosure 3, attachment 3 in your package. And we're running right about on budget. If you look at total operating expenses, 58%. If you're going on straight line budget, we'd be about right there. Personnel services, we're slightly behind, and we always are because we always have some vacancies. Maintenance operating expenses, we're slightly ahead. And again, if you look at the expenditure section in attachment 3, you can see that insurance is one of the ones that is markedly ahead of budget. Part of that is because we pay insurance at the beginning of the fiscal year in one lump sum. And it was also a little more expensive than what we budgeted. And then we have conservation efforts, specifically rebate programs that we were putting a lot of resources into during the drought to bring down that usage that you saw on the previous slides. And so those are making us a little bit ahead on the maintenance and operating expense side. Financing costs are right on because we spread those over 12 months. And then the capital allocation, which is that primarily staffing that we allocate to CIP projects, that's right at budget also. Fire flow projects are 22.4% of budget, and district projects are 33.8%, so about 49.6% on total expenditures. But then with those CIPs, we always have to show you kind of this additional look. So this includes capital encumbrances, so things like the San Geronimo generators that we've encumbered, but maybe haven't paid yet. Those are $11.6 million total. So if you add those two items together, we're right at 58% of budget on capital expenses, and overall we're 58.3%. So we're right on where we're supposed to be on budget. And then finally, we always talk about fund balances. So the restricted and designated fund, that's things like general liability and workers' comp. That's a $19.7 million stable. We have spent down rate stabilization fund, and we'll look at that in a little more detail here in a moment. But again, that was by design to get us through the drought. We knew that we were going to have reductions in revenues, and this is the way that we met those reductions. Fire flow fund is healthy at $3.9 million, grown since the beginning of the fiscal year by $800,000. Pension reserve fund remains stable at $2 million. Capital fund stable at $24.3 million. And then the operating unrestricted fund, we spent that down from $32.6 million down to $24.3 million. Again, that's by design, got us through the drought. And so we're now at $24.3 million at that. And if you look down here, that puts us at 3.2 months of reserves that we have available if we had any major impediments to revenue inflows. And then our debt coverage ratio, we're projecting at the end of the year to be at 1.4. So that's a little bit below the board's target of 1.5, but is above our debt covenant requirements of 1.25. We should mention there, we actually just got our AA rating reaffirmed by Fitch. We've been meeting them over the past few years. And despite us spending down these reserve levels and bringing down our debt service coverage ratio, they still view us favorably going forward and think that we're in good financial state and reaffirm that AA rating. And then outstanding bonded debt is $139.3 million. And then other debt, those smaller debts that we have, like the Las Colinas plant, is $6.9 million. And then I told you we'd look at those reserves, which are basically this rate stabilization and the operating unrestricted fund. So you can see that we've spent down as of January 31st from 9.4 down to 2.25 on the rate stabilization fund. And we've taken the operating unrestricted fund down from 32.6 down to $24.3 million. And just based on our projections for the rest of the year, we think the rate stabilization fund by June 30th will be at $1.65 million. And that the operating and unrestricted fund will be about $21 million. So, and again, you can see the breakdown here. Some of that was for the emergency intertie project that we spent money on, Castania Station Rehab Project, Peacock Gap, and then this is a transfer from rate stabilization to operating restricted fund where we spend that money on a lot of things related to the conservation efforts. So some of the big expenditures that we've had there, we had the water patrol earlier in the year, water waste patrol, we had advertising, we had increasing rebate programs. So that's money that we expended there. And then this last line is this $11 million is basically a backfill of the revenues that we've lost during the drought. But again, as we go forward into the next fiscal year, we think that will normalize and come back to the levels we've seen before. So in summary, the drought has absolutely had an impact on revenues. We showed you it's about 30% decrease that we've seen fiscal year to date. Expenditures are tracking right about with the budget. And our reserve balances are declining, but our reserve balances are declining by design. And they were put in place to get us through this kind of an event that we've seen in the past year. So that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has questions.
So Chuck, could I just briefly note that as Chuck noted, of course, the rate stabilization by design was drawn down to support the decrease in revenues and increase in some expenditures during the drought emergency. We are keeping our eye on the revenues, and at some point, if it doesn't pick up, staff will be bringing to the board discussions on cost control, getting through this year and potentially next year. What we do think it's prudent to maintain, of course, some measure of reserves for unanticipated. So anyway, we'll be tracking that closely and talking more to the board about that going forward.
To that end, Ben, it seems to me we should be considering taking that money, that the found money, basically the reimbursement for the delinquent accounts, and applying that to the reserves as opposed to plowing it into the general fund. It came from the reserves. We might as well put it back in the reserves, or at least consider doing that, it seems to me.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that money is earmarked for specific accounts. So that's money that will flow back out to those who have those delinquencies.
Well, they can't flow back out to them if they haven't paid it, right?
Yeah, but they'll be applied to their accounts.
Right, but then it comes back in.
Yes.
Right. So it's just kind of a paper work thing. So the money that comes back, it seems to me, should be applied to the reserves if we can, because this is our chance to capture it. Otherwise, it just gets washed into the mix.
Yeah, but that money's already counted in the revenues we showed you, and we're still pulling money out of reserves to backfill revenue. So it's really.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned about, Chuck. I wanted to know what that status was. Yeah. Okay. And then I guess the other question I have, Cynthia, is, I would like to see some recommendations on how fast we should attempt to restore those reserves.
Yeah, well, what we were thinking, President Russell, is that absolutely, that would be part of, as we get into the coming cycle of cost of service and looking at the upcoming process through that with rates, the reserve replenishment would definitely be part of that discussion.
And to that end, Ben, I'm glad to hear that. And to that end, it seems to me that we should use this drought as a reset value for what the, I forgot, revenue stabilization, I think we call it, as I said 100 times, it's always been called drought reserve in my experience up until the last 10 years or so. And I was about to say that and I had to hold it back. But, we should look hard at what that rate stabilization fund should be, the maximum. Maybe it should be twice what it is based upon what we've seen in this one. Now, I don't know how you superimpose COVID over top of a drought. That's kind of a weird one. So, yeah, I don't know if that's really a meaningful period or not, because it's neither the drought nor the COVID, but the pair did damage to the system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So did we actually get funds for the replenishment of delinquent accounts?
Yes, Director Breider. Yep, we received that, I think, last month. Yeah. In December.
And Chuck, could you, before you leave and ride off into the sunset, do an update of delinquent accounts with the new replenishment?
Yeah. Yeah, I can get something for the board on that. Absolutely.
That would be great. That would be great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, any other board comment on this item? Do we have any public comment on this item, Terry?
I do not see any.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Roger Roberts just raised his hand. Let me
Okay.
go grab him. Mr. Roberts?
Hello
Good,
again.
sir.
Hello again. Can you hear me?
We can.
Loud and clear, Roger.
Something you might want to also consider is a small bond issuance to replace reserves. If you wait and don't pursue a bond issue until you actually decide how much you need for capital replacement, that isn't going to help you stay on top of, if you will, the level of reserves. So it might make sense for you to consider an issuance of a small issuance of a bond to replace reserves.
That's a great idea, Roger. Thank you for that thought.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
I agree. It is a good thought. And we are talking about a bond issuance. So before we adjourn, I just, and I'm sure we'll do a few more of these, but I just want to make a special thanks to Chuck McBride, who's been with us for a short period of time, for his really extraordinary contributions to the district. I've had the benefit of working with a number of CFOs, and I have to say, Chuck, you really, you really top the bunch. Just the professionalism and the thoroughness, and frankly, the accessibility that you've brought to these issues. I just want to say for myself, and I've chaired this committee for a long time, I really value and appreciate. And I just, like I say, I'm sure we'll be saying goodbye to you in a few more times, but I just want to, in the context of this committee, which has really been your thing, I just want to express my appreciation and my thanks.
Thank you, Chair Fuller. Appreciate that.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.